Thank you, worship band, and thank every single one of you for joining us today. We're genuinely thankful, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to serve you in this way, to welcome you not only into our presence, but into the presence of God. And our prayer is always to speak what is true, and I hope each one of us hears that. Last week we started a new series called The Other Bible Stories. Some of you have probably heard all of these that we'll talk about, but they're lesser known stories. They're not ones that like David and Goliath or Daniel in the lion's den, or stories that even people who aren't familiar with the Bible have probably heard some reference to them. They're more obscure, and there's some reasons, but they really matter. And the whole point of this whole thing, I'm just laying it out, the whole point is helping us to understand that God's moral boundaries are more like guardrails than fences. They're not so much to keep us in or to keep anybody out. They're to keep us on track. He's trying to take us somewhere. And he's warning us of dangers. He's warning us of distractions. He's warning us of anything that could keep us from accomplishing what he knows is not only best for us, but best for him and best for the world. And so as we explore these stories, I hope that you hear that. Another thing is I hope that even if you've read the Bible through many times or you're just getting into reading the Bible, I hope you fall in love with it. There's so many fantastic stories, funny stuff, crazy stuff that really makes you scratch your head. And we're going to look at a couple of those today as well. So you ready to go on another journey here today? Okay, praise God. Here we go. So last week we talked about Abraham in his life. About 400 years later, the story of Moses starts. And about 40 years after that, the story picks up where we are. Moses had help from this guy named Joshua, as well as several others. Joshua becomes the leader of Israel just as they are about to cross the border into the promised land. And at this point in the story, God is speaking to Joshua and encouraging him. In Joshua chapter 1, we read, "No one," this is God talking, "no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people into the land I swore to their ancestors to give them." What a wonderful promise to be with someone the way that he was with Moses. Because not only did he empower Moses, but he gave Moses a lot of grace along the way. Not only did he do some great things through Moses, but when Moses really messed up, God still let him lead all the way up until this moment in time. And he's telling Joshua, listen, you're going to be the one who leads these people in. This promise is about to get kept after all these centuries. It's going to happen on your watch. But I'm going to be with you the same way I was with Moses. And I believe that's still the way God is with us. He's hoping that we're going to get it right. He's empowering us to get it right, but he has grace and mercy along the way. Literally, thank God. Now, up to this point, they had 5 books in the Bible. They didn't have a printed Bible. That whole concept hadn't been invented yet. And I don't know nobody knows exactly what form it was in, but the 5 books that we have at the beginning of our Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, that's what they called the book of the law. That's all they had at this point. Now, if he had a Bible, he could have looked forward in time and seen what David wrote in Psalm 119. He said, "I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you." In other words, David is saying, I am taking effort. I'm making a point to make sure that your word is inside of me, because that's what I want to be about. Well, Joshua couldn't read that verse because it hadn't been written yet, but he did hear directly from God. And God said this, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. And then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Maybe part of the reason God had to encourage him so much is because he knew the Israelites were going to say this to him. This sounds scary. If you know anything about those stories and how they rebelled against Moses and against God time after time after time, how they had to spend 40 years just wandering in the wilderness till some of the rebels died so that they could get to the edge again, this would be scary as well as encouraging. Chapter 1, verse 16, then they answered Joshua, whatever you have commanded, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. I don't know about you, but that'd be about the moment I'd be like, I'm out, I'm done. I don't want to lead these people. I can't handle leading people that are going to follow the way they followed Moses. Just being real. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. That's going to happen. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey it, whatever you may command them will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Now that's a pretty big commitment. And this is kind of deliberate foreshadowing here. I didn't put that in the Bible. It's there. But I'm mentioning it here because this death penalty thing comes into the story later. They were committing to this. They knew that was it. At this point in time, for whatever reason, we could debate whether it should be now or not. But right at this point in time, the penalty for disobeying God was the death. And they all knew that. Okay, everybody got that? Okay, we move on. Here we go. Here's the thing. Whether we understand stuff or not, whether we understand stuff in the Bible or not, all we really need to get where God is taking us is trust. And if you really think about it, most of the time we don't understand fully just about anything. We don't really, anybody that we have to put our faith in, doctors, authorities, the government, our closest friends, our spouses, anybody, we don't 100% know we can trust them at any given time. We don't necessarily believe that they're 100% right about everything. We choose whether we're going to trust them or not. We choose whether we're going to go along, whether we understand or not. Does that sound like you guys as well? There's very few things that I understand completely, but I choose what I trust. I'm standing on this stage here right now, and I trust it. I'm not thinking about it a lot. I'm not going, but I'm also not going every step I take, because I'm pretty sure it's going to, I don't understand it. I'm not sure exactly how this stage is built, but I've stood on it many times and it's held up so far, so that's all I need to know. Trust is greater than understanding. If you're writing stuff down, that word trust is the first thing to write down. Well, Joshua, we'll tell a little bit more of his story, but you've probably heard his story. He's in the middle of a bunch of stories, and his own story is pretty good. One thing you probably know about him is he was one of 2 spies that Moses sent into the land of Canaan 40 years before this story happens. One of 2 that actually came back with a good report. Not that things were going to be easy, but hey, just forget everything we saw. God is on our side. That's why only Joshua and Caleb from that whole generation, even Moses had to die. Everybody who made that decision to not go into Canaan then, all the adults that made that decision had to die first before they get this second chance. This time, watch what Joshua does. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies. And he sends them to a place that really throws people a lot because of what it looks like. I looked this up. It's pronounced Shittim. Just, you can relax. So. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go, look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. And so they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. Now, this is actually pretty good cover. This is pretty good spy kind of thing. If you're a foreigner entering a place, where else would you stay and not raise suspicion? I'm not sure exactly. The Bible doesn't tell us anything more about this. We don't even know these guys' names. I don't know what they did there, besides the obvious thing that happens next where they're saved. We don't know how Rahab discovered that they were Hebrews. We're not sure about a whole bunch of things. That's something that I encourage you to do. As you read the Bible, ask a couple of questions. We make so many assumptions in the bad direction or assumption in the good direction. The only thing we know for sure is what the text tells us. Let's leave that standing there and look at the next big truth. The next big truth that we're going to see in quite a bit of where we're going today is this. Trust is the same thing as action. If you really trust, it's the same thing as believing, it's the same thing as faith. Those big concepts that we see throughout the scripture, every time we see these words, the original language, the concept is about action, not just something you feel or something you think. And when they say that they trust God, when we say that we trust God, that means we actually bet our lives that God knows best. God knows better than we do. That's what trust is. Trust is something you act on. And when we trust God, here's something I hope that you're hearing today, and I hope you're hearing hope, not condemnation, but this is just true. This is so powerful, and I hope you hear this. When we fully trust God is when we see God's real power. When we bet on God being right rather than us. That's when we see him empower us to do things we couldn't do or wouldn't even want to do on our own. When we decide that we know better than God, God still is with us as he was with Moses. He still loves us. He still gives us other chances. But all we really see about God, day after day, week after week, year after year, is how merciful and kind he is. That he's willing to work around our messes. That he's sometimes even able to work through our messes. But we never see anything else until we fully surrender. God's dream is that we fully surrender. Again, Joshua and Caleb, the two spies who came back with a good report, they were pretty good at that. And Caleb comes back in the story later. I love how what happens as they conquer Canaan. They get almost everybody conquered. And then one of the things that the 10 spies who said, absolutely not, we can't do this with or without God. One of the things they were so worried about is there were giants in the land. We don't know how big they were, but they were big and they were scared to death of them. And they said, we can't beat the giants. Well, they conquer almost everybody else in Canaan. And then Caleb goes to Joshua and says, me and my boys are going to take care of the giants. Just us. And Joshua's like, you can have their land. And that's exactly what happened. It's an awesome story. I wish I had more time in that one. That's a fun one. Rahab's story is an amazing story about trust being action. This woman, we don't know how she came to believe in God for sure. We're not sure why she made the choice that she made. What we do know is she made it, and she protected those spies and went on to marry a Jewish man, become a full follower of God, and actually became part of the line of Jesus. Rahab is one of Jesus's physical ancestors. This woman trusted God enough to literally bet her life. She was giving up her livelihood. She'd given up her everything that she'd ever known and betting it all on this God of the Hebrews that was coming to invade her town. Trust is action. The people of Israel had to really trust God to watch him part the waters again and enter the border. The border was the river of Jordan. And once again, they had to cross. God was going to separate the waters like he had in the Red Sea. But this time, he said, I'm not going to even start separating it until the priest's feet hit the water. You got to take that step before I'm going to move. Because trust is action. It's not just something you think or something you feel. You got to do it. So here come the priests, and it starts separating. By the time everybody got to the edge, there's dry land, and they walk through. Pretty amazing stuff. And not only amazing to them, but amazing to the people around them. Rahab, specifically in her words in this passage, she says that the hearts of all the kings of Canaan were melting within them. They're absolutely terrified of God. And speaking of people's hearts melting within them, watch what happens next with Joshua. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Hararath. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was a random Israelite guy at this moment, and somebody comes at me with a homemade flint knife, that would take an awful lot of trust. A lot. But apparently they did it. They decided to do whatever it took to keep following God. Here's some other things that happened in this little section. They started celebrating the Passover in Canaan for the first time. They started to eat off of the land for the first time, and manna stopped coming. All those 40 years God had sent the manna and the quail, that stopped happening at this point. That had to be a little bit scary. But it was also, that's the end. That was before, this is now. Now you've got to take the land. If you're going to keep eating, you're going to have to take the land. There's no going back. We've done so many things. We have burnt the bridges behind us. We are now walking fully, confidently into God's will. Maybe you're still scared. Maybe you're still a little bit sore. Maybe you don't understand, but you're going to trust enough to do something. I don't know about you, but I've been at moments like that a lot in my life. And I feel a lot of times less like Joshua and more like Beaky Buzzard from Looney Tunes. Do you guys remember that guy? He's a crazy character. I think I got a picture of him. Yeah, that guy. And the joke there is no matter what he's supposed to do, he's always going, no. You know what I'm talking about? And one of my favorite ones is his mom. And by the way, his name was later renamed Beaky, but the oldest one, like 1930s or something, it was a really old cartoon, his name was Killer. And his mom says, well, Killer, what are you waiting for? Get going, scram. And he, oh, no, nope. And she literally kicks him out of the nest. And he goes falling and then finally just frantically realizes that he actually can fly. And I look back over my life and there were so many times where I was going, no. And instead, God just goes, and I had to learn. Anybody else? Anybody besides me? Okay, yeah. And it feels scary. It is scary, but it's ultimately the good thing. Sometimes we have to trust even when we don't want to. Well, let's jump back in the story. Joshua was near the town of Jericho. He looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, are you friend or foe? Neither one, he replied. I am the commander of the Lord's army. At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. I am at your command, Joshua said. What do you want your servant to do? I hope you hear this as well, especially where we are right now in America. It's so important that we don't try to get God to be on our side or fight people that we don't think are on our side. The question that we need to be asking ourselves constantly, whatever we believe or feel about anything else in the world, is, are we on God's side? I love that he doesn't say, well, obviously I'm on your side. I'm an angel. I'm here to protect you. He says, I'm neither one, really. I'm the commander of the armies of God. Are you on my side? That's ultimately the question. One of my favorite stories about Abraham Lincoln is somebody came to him one time in the Civil War and said, do you believe God is on the side of the North? And this was his reply. I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right, but it is my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation be on the Lord's side. And I simply ask that all of us, as we move forward, that we just keep praying that. God, help us, especially as individuals, as families, as a church, also as a nation as much as possible. May we not be satisfied that we're on this side or that side of any issue. May we keep asking, are we on the Lord's side? And if we're all asking that, we all collectively have a better chance of actually getting there. Joshua 6:5. When you hear the priest give one long blast on ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. And then the walls of the town will collapse and the people can charge straight into the town. You've probably heard this story, the Battle of Jericho. There's even a song about it. You remember? Sing it with me just for a second if you know it. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. Jericho, yeah, Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. See, you know that story. It's a great story. They march around in silence and then go back to camp 6 days in a row. The last day they march around 7 times and then scream and blow those trumpets really loud. The walls came down. They run in. They kill everything, burn everything, destroy everything. It's a huge monster victory that obviously was given to them by God. But if you still got a printed Bible or even an app, you could see the same kind of effect. But you turn the page from Joshua chapter 6 to Joshua chapter 7, and the first word in almost any version you're going to read is the word but. So there's a little goofy wordplay here. I hope you can forgive me. I'm all about puns and goofy stuff like that. That's why the title of this sermon is Joshua and the Achan but. There's this guy named Achan, and the story begins with but. Let's jump right in. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. We'll come back to that word in a second. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, the tribe of Judah, took some of them. And so the Lord's anger had burned against Israel. We kind of skipped this part. I think you'd heard that part of the story. But they were commanded by God to destroy everything except the treasure. And the treasure went into like the temple. It belonged to God. But this guy was like, yeah, I'm going to keep some though. And not only did he do that, he also had to have included his family because we find out in a few minutes that he hid it under their tent. And that would have taken some work and everybody in his family would have known. But Joshua and them didn't know. Nobody else in Israel knew until they went to fight this little tiny town named Ai that was next to. Now, Ai is spelled A-I, and for years and years I've always heard it pronounced A-I, like we're spelling it out, like, artificial intelligence or something like that, okay? But it's just I, just so you know. It's like this, I. It's just I. Anyway, just throwing that out. Actually, I love when people read the Bible and just struggle with the words. It's fine. It's reminding us that it was written in a different time, in a different place. Sometimes there's one guy in particular in our church, I won't say his name out loud, but I love it when he reads because he'll just throw in names. He'll be like, and so they went unto Rockwood. and Moses said unto James, he'll just throw in, that's fine. Anyway, back to this, derailed. Here's the problem. Joshua doesn't pray about what to happen next. He doesn't see if the angel's going to come back. He doesn't ask for any special instructions about what to go next. They're riding so high on this huge victory they just had that they just kind of all get together and go, that little town's so small, we'll just send about 3,000 people over, we'll knock them out, and we'll keep on going. They don't pray about it. They don't think about it. They make up their own plan, and it goes bad. They all get routed. Several of them die. If they had a Bible, they could have looked ahead and read this in Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. They didn't do that, so they learned the hard way. This is probably the lowest part of Joshua's story. He's just crushed. He can't understand. He has no idea that the sin has been committed, but he also had no idea that they would lose. He doesn't know why. He's just panicking. He falls on his face before God and just lays there for like the rest of the day. Doesn't eat, doesn't do anything. And when God finally speaks to him, it's kind of interesting what he says. The Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying on your face like this? Israel has sinned and broken my covenant. They have stolen some of the things that I commanded must be set apart for me. And they have not only stolen them, but they've lied about it and have hidden the things among their own belongings." They've not only stolen it, but they had lied about it, and they had hidden it among their own belongings. This is the biggest part of the sin here, guys. God has so much mercy and so much love and so much grace, especially this side of Jesus. We're 2,000 years this side of Jesus. This was a long time before Jesus. But this side, under the new covenant, we take his grace for granted. But here's the thing. What we do sometimes that just is the worst possible thing we could do is we not only sin, but we build shelters and boundaries of our own, guardrails around ourselves, fences around ourselves to protect our sin. We create systems in our lives that make sure that we don't get caught and that we have time and we have money and we have emotion or whatever we need to keep investing in that sin. This is what Achan has done here. He's not only just had a moment of not trusting God so much, he's not only just tangibly stolen something, he's roped in his whole family to keep that secret and to hold on to this treasure. And whenever they move next time, they're going to keep it hidden and they're going to keep it going, hiding under that tent. Are you following me on this? They've got a whole system of keeping that sin a secret. God's not okay with that. That word that they use there is interesting. In Hebrew, it's kedem. Kedem is 100% off limits or 100% devoted to God. It's an interesting word, one of many that don't translate exactly into any specific English word. Close ones that we use often is devoted or banned. But the idea is there's no leeway here. There's no gray area. This is 100% a boundary of God's. Okay, this thing belongs to God. That's what he had taken. We still tracking? We good? All right, here we go. We're heading to the next. This is kind of the central big truth, but like all of these, it's more than it looks. The big truth is this: never keep secret sins. 4 words. Say that with me if you would. Never keep secret sins. Pretty simple. Don't do that. But the reason is because, again, God's moral boundaries for us are guardrails, not fences. It's not just don't keep a secret. That's not the point. The point is when we make our sins secret, when we don't repent, when we don't get accountability, when we don't try to build a system so it's harder to sin the next time, when we don't pay attention and go, wow, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that I just waltzed right into that and I knew better. What do I do next time so that doesn't happen again? Instead of that, we go, man, how do I keep this a secret? And how do I make sure I could do that again and again and still get by with it? Never keep secret sins. Say it with me one more time if you would. Never keep secret sins. Why? Because they derail us. They keep us from ever seeing anything but God's grace and mercy. They never let us get anywhere. They keep us trapped. They keep us zapped. So obviously, this means to avoid sin, but it's so much bigger and deeper than that. Well, now they start this process. Okay, God, show us who it was that sinned. And this is an interesting Bible trivia thing. I don't know if maybe all of you already know this. A lot of people don't. But there's a couple ways God speaks to us. Several different, actually, but a couple in the Old Testament. One is he just speaks directly. There's several. You can usually tell when it's doing that. It's in quotes, at least in the English version. There's no punctuation in Hebrew. But they have, God will just say stuff. He just comes to a prophet or a leader or whoever else and he just literally says stuff. But then there's other stuff where you can see him and they say, and God narrowed it down. And so they knew that it was the tribe. You see that in this story. They knew it was the tribe of Judah and they knew it was family of Zimri and they start narrowing it down. And whenever you see that kind of stuff, what's happening is they're using the Urim and Thummim. And nobody actually really knows for sure what that is either, but it's something that was inside of the priest's chest piece, the high priest's chest piece. And people have all kinds of theories. Some people think that somehow those little gemstones lit up. Some people think a lot, but what I think most scholars have agreed on is it's some form of dice, kind of like casting lots that you see sometimes in the New Testament. That inside of that was a little thing, and they'd get these out, and they'd say, okay, it's the tribe of Judah, and it's the family of Zimri. And a lot of times, actually, when you're seeing, you're going, how are these people hearing so crazy clear from God? Why don't I hear that clear? I'm not telling you, I don't even know what the Urim and Thummim are for sure. I'm not telling you to go roll dice. I'm not telling you that. I'm just letting you know, sometimes when they heard from God, it was through this system that he'd set up. Does it make any kind of sense at all? And that's what you hear here. You're hearing in several times in the story, God is directly speaking to Joshua, but at this point in this story, the high priest is using the Urim and Thummim, whatever they are. Well, they narrow it down, and it comes down, it's Achan. And here's where we see that Joshua, it might be a coincidence, but I think he likes puns too. I really do. I think he likes wordplay. I'll show you why in a second. Joshua 7:24. Then Joshua and all the Israelites took Achan, the silver, the robe, the bar of gold, his sons, daughters, cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, tent, everything he had, they brought it to the valley of Achor. Achor means trouble. And if you look at these words here, there's 4 words that Joshua uses in this one little passage. One is Achor. It's the name of the valley. It means trouble. Achan kind of means trouble. This guy's name, ironically enough, kind of meant trouble. Akeretanu means have troubled, you have troubled. And Yekar Korka means will trouble. I'm not very good at Hebrew, but what I hope you can see here is there's 4 things. Here's what Joshua says. Then Joshua says to Achan, why have you brought trouble on us? The Lord will now bring trouble on you. And so the Israelites stoned Achan and his family and burned their bodies. They piled a great heap of stones over Achan, which remains to this day, which is why the place has been called the Valley of Trouble ever since. And so the Lord was no longer angry. A lot of trouble in there. Kind of fun. But it's a disturbing little thing. Did you see what just happened? The people just killed an entire family and some animals and destroyed a bunch of stuff and then burned it and covered it with stones. And when it says to this day, it means to the day that that part of the scriptures, the book of Joshua in this case, was written. Doesn't mean you could go there today and see that pile of stones, literally today. But why do you think God was happy? By the way, we're right here at the end, but this is a real question. Just think about it for a second. How did that possibly please God? I'm still wrestling with it myself, but here's what I believe it's got to be at least part of the answer. He's building a guardrail for everybody else. I'm serious about this. As you go in and you take Canaan, I'm serious. Do what I tell you. Don't do what I don't tell you. I've got some grace and mercy, but absolutely don't spend all your time and energy, instead of doing what I ask you to do, trying to keep your own plan going instead. That's not acceptable. I remember when I was a really little kid, I talked to my great-grandfather, and he was telling us about life in Oklahoma before any of us could have ever imagined it. And he was telling us that one of the things they do pretty often was actually go and watch hangings downtown. And I was like, that's disgusting. Like, what in the world? And he was like, well, let me tell you something, John. I remember he rubbed my head. He said, we never stole or did any of that stuff because we knew that was going to happen. That's makes sense. Anyway. If he could have read ahead, he could have seen in Proverbs that was written hundreds of years later, my child, don't reject the Lord's discipline. Don't be upset when he corrects you, for the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights. Joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. He also could have read about a guy named Hosea, whose story is amazing, and about God's love even when we completely betray him. And here, I love this passage in Hosea. I will return her vineyards to her and transform the valley of trouble. That's the valley of Achan. A lot of translations just say valley of Achan. I will return her vineyards to her and transform the valley of trouble into a gateway of hope. She will give herself to me there as she did long ago when she was young, when I freed her from her captivity in Egypt. Isaiah said something very similar. He said, the plain of Sharon will again be filled with flocks for my people who have searched for me. And the valley of Achan will be a place to pasture herds. Brothers and sisters, I hope you're hearing the hope in what we're exploring today. God has mercy. God has grace. He is willing to work in the middle of our mess. He is in the business of forgiving us and redeeming us and transforming us. And there's story after story throughout the Bible where he gives us chance after chance. You and I all have stories where he's given us chance after chance. He can redeem trouble and turn it into something good. But wouldn't it be better if instead of investing in the trouble, we invested in the good? Instead of doing all the things that we do to keep ourselves and our families and the people around us, whoever keeps track of whatever we do on the internet, whatever we do on our phones, instead of all the stuff that we do to try to protect our whatever and just keep doing whatever we want to do, what if we put all of that energy and time into forming habits that keep us doing the right thing, that make it easy to not do the wrong thing, where we have accountability, where we have people that are keeping us on track? That's the hope. That's what's actually available to us. And no matter how many times we've messed up to get here where we are today, as we all move forward together, there is hope. You could be free of anything that's kept you broken. You could be free today of anything that has kept you bound. Anything that you've kept as a secret, that you just are living in fear that somebody's going to find out. You could be free from that. You could. Paul writes to the Philippians, and I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Jesus Christ returns. Whatever you need to do this morning, we're going to sing one more song, and I invite you to respond to God. Maybe you've got a secret sin you'd like to confess and pray about. Maybe you need to give your life to Jesus for the first time. Maybe we need to introduce you to some people that we know and trust, that, or I myself could help you, and we could form some accountability and help you get free. There's several people in our congregation that work in CR or AA and things like that. I could introduce you to them. You could get rid of some habits like that. We could help you. God could help you, but you've got to stop keeping it a secret. And whatever else God's asking you to do today, just remember, trust is bigger than understanding. You don't even have to understand why God thinks it's wrong. But if you're willing to say, okay, here we go, it's yours, he's going to respond. Would you respond as we stand and sing?